Well, in Persia, you generally have people which, oh, I don't know, look at all these pictures. This guy has this little Phrygian cap. I don't know if you can see this, but it's the way the little cap does with the little wump over on it. You can see a little lumpy cap, and they're in all these pictures. And the neat thing about these pictures is something that I helped figure out is if you look, it's just weird, but even no matter where you go in all these different reliefs, his legs are all built in the same way, and it has to do with Taurus the bull, and he's sacrificing the bull. And so I looked at it, and these people start up in Samaria, in Persia, in that area, you know, east of Eden, if you will. No, this is the place that, believe it or not, the Sumerians had their own word, Eden, E-D-I-N, and it was the name of this area. So yeah, they had Eden, and they had a flood story that flooded the whole world, and how people got saved by Enki and everything too, way before the Bible, about twice as long back in time as you give time, if you even put in the idea of these people that they throw in there living 999 years, you know, because this goes back like 28,000 years. If you look at their king's list, it goes back to 225,000 years ago. And it's a Stele King's List, totally marked up. I'm not going to go there. Look at one of my other things that's got the King's List on it, and it runs back. And I believe that they were just looking at moons at that time. If we're just looking at moons, it goes to 26,800, but then we're at the year 2000, so it's 28,600 now or something like that is where it basically puts it at. I digress. Look at this leg posture. I've got this video I've already made on it. I think I'm just going to interject and show it right here, and then I'm going to show you the video of knowledge of what Mithras and this sun god thing and what he means. And oddly enough, you look at Mithras like this here, and you get a depiction of the things that went along with it, and how it had a shepherd king. It had the ancient Sumerian shepherd king who had turned into God, and how he's anointing Mithra. And there's a dove. This is a fresco that's from 300 BC, people, and he's got 12 disciples that go around him. But people back then, the sacred mystic knowledge and stuff is all about the fact that this is 12 disciples are the zodiac and the little trees of life that they have with them. And this is God known as Saturnus. This is Saturn, who's saying it's all okay. And by the way, this looks like John the Baptist baptizing Jesus Christ, and I'm not sure, but I'm willing to bet that this is the fresco they were looking at when they were trying to think of what to make up the Bible out of. Doesn't it?
Oh yeah, but there was Mithras. Just the two of them were there. Well, there are amazing things claimed about Mithras, and I'll read you some of them. He was a savior, Mithras, sent to earth to live as a mortal, through whom it was possible for sinners to be reborn into immortal life. He died for our sins, but came back to life the following Sunday. He was born of a virgin on December the 25th in a manger or perhaps a cave, attended by shepherds, and became known as the light of the world. He had 12 disciples with whom he shared a last meal before dying. His devotees symbolically consumed the flesh and blood of him. Because Mithras was the sun god, he was worshipped on Sundays.
Is he a tribute band?
He was often depicted with a halo around his head. And Mithraists gave each other gifts on December the 25th. The leader of the religion was called the Papa, and their HQ was on Vatican Hill in Rome.
And you're not kind of writing off the chance that this was just a massive coincidence. And then one day that they all went.
Well, isn't that special?
So you know, whenever I told you the Jewish people went through Armageddon a few times now, well, this latest time would have been World War II and the Holocaust that happens, and it always solemns somebody to hear about it. But I want to let you know that more Christians died by a multiple of numbers trying to save the Jews and to stop Hitler than actually the Jews died. But it's genocide, and it's not a good thing, and we as a people tried to stop it. But I tell you another thing is that in the Bible, the people that are running around causing genocide are these very people we tried to save. They're killing the man, the women, the children, and the livestock. In certain cases, they keep the young girls. They're supposed to check and see if they're a virgin, and if they are, they can keep them. Yeah. And all the problems they have culminate at Baal. And I tell you now that kind of is a role reversal of what actually went down, that they were worshiping the god with the horns and things on it that Moses talks about when you've got to put the blood on the horns of an altar. Moses had horns. If you want, I'll show you pictures. Just Google image Moses horns. It's going to show you a lot of famous people drawing things, and they know Moses. And the reason they have it is because it says it in the Bible. Now they've changed it to try to say it sounds like rays, that the word that exactly means goat horns means rays of sunlight now. It means rays of sunlight now. No, I'm not gonna go there right now. I'm on a different topic. So I'm looking up World War II and the atrocity that happened, and it pegged off on this thing that said the Jewish revolt of the 1930s. And I'm like, what? Well, that's kind of like the Jewish revolt right before, right at, the 80s, 69 or 68, 69, leading up into there, that the Jews had a big revolt and killed off all the Romans, and then the Romans came back and they caused Armageddon basically right then. That's your second time. In the Indiana Jones, it falls 3 times. 1, 2, as they go over the waterfalls. And I'm showing you 1, and then 2 at Rome, taking them out, which a lot of people to this day know that the Roman fall of Rome was supposed to be Armageddon and everything. And I tell you now, Rome was willing to let it look that way, because if it is well known that if they wanted Armageddon, Rome would give it to them, because they don't have an army worth a damn. What are they trying to do? They've got this doomsday cult where it's all going to end. And Rome is like, it's not all going to end. We're all going to become great things and make great ships and travel the world. What the hell are these people saying it's all going to end? He found out they're saying it's going to all end for thousands of years now. And he go, oh, is this the idiot on the street corner telling you the world's about to end and the sky's falling? Well, if they want Armageddon, I'll give it to them. And so he did. Well, look at the Jewish revolt of 69. If you want to look into that, it'll blow your mind what you find out about that and what Josephus said about it. I'll go into a little bit about that shortly, but here's the Jewish revolt of the late 1930s, and look at the mobs of people and how they're revolting in Germany. Now, this isn't their homeland. They came here whenever they all got kicked out of where they were at, and they came to Germany. So they were all immigrants and stuff. And after they had been here a short time, next thing you know, they started taking over all the banks and a lot of the prominent businesses and changing the prices on things and really causing a lot of havoc. And in doing so, I mean, people started getting killed. Look here, people started getting killed for it. And this is all a Jewish revolt. And during this time, these ancient Jewish elders ended up propagating what ended up being a Jewish revolt against what would be Germany. And believe it or not, the answer of Germany for that was Hitler. And they tried to get it under wraps and could not. And they charged a bigger revolt, like this one in this picture right here, in 1936. Arab demonstrators, and it of course involved Britain being down there at the time, and them trying to have their hand in everything with South Africa and shit, that drew them and consequently us into the war. And by the way, they drew us into the war, and I find that there was this pact that I knew nothing about. that if they got us into the war, that somehow Israel would get back Palestine. And when I first heard that, I was like, well, get back Palestine, that's not theirs. You know, when Jacob showed up with Jacob's ladder and stuff, he actually showed up in a foreign people's land, and then he said he found God, and he put up a stele and made Bethlehem and stuff. When he's doing that, there are people that are there. This is other people's land. I'm going to walk over here a couple of 100 yards from your house, and I'm going to flip up a rock and scratch on it, and I'm going to tell you that I made a city, and that God in a dream just told me that your whole fucking country is going to be my promised land. I had a dream. You're going to wonder if I was on opium and stuff, and I'm going to tell you it doesn't matter because God told me in a dream. You know, I once had a dream that God came in a booming voice from the clouds, believe it or not, and told me that I needed to help Santa Claus. And then I slept from what would have been the end of November until December 24th. Apparently, or I had a quick thought of me being asleep every damn night, all the way until then. And then on December 24th, Santa Claus came and knocked on my window and got me. And somehow we took a old rider wagon and put a board across it. He used his magic crap, and I helped him deliver gifts, which we basically went over into Webb Hill area and dropped off at a couple of people's houses that were important, and then he taught me a few little things about, and then brought me back home, and that was it. So I didn't even help him out for the whole night, but because of that, you know, I had a dream of that. So I guess I was scared that that Christmas what was going to happen was that I was going to turn into Santa Claus. That what happens actually is Santa Claus dies every once in a while, and then somebody new is the Santa Claus. And what this was him showing me how to do it, because they were going to do something and like kill me, and I'd be reborn as Santa Claus. And well, I stayed up all damn night that night. Yeah, but I can't just go around anywhere and stick up a rock and scratch on it and say that it's mine, especially not in an area that's already been inhabited by people for thousands of years. I don't care if you think you had a dream of God or not. Well, now we look back on the Bible and like, well, this is Israel getting their spot. And you're like, no, this is Israel causing genocide to steal another people's land, no matter how the hell you look at it. Like the Americans took the land from the Indians, they're doing it to these other people. But instead of smallpox and shit pretty much taking the people out, it's actual genocide. And they do talk about human sacrifice and cannibalism. It's pretty disgusting. You know, and the Romans found out about all this, and they're like, man, if these people want Armageddon, I'll give it to them. And through the 30s and 40s, the Nazis started to persecute Jews in Germany and stuff, and a lot of Jews fled out, and they went to Palestine, which infuriated the Palestinian Arabs. And because they had already been basically cleansed out of the area, and here they were shoving themselves right back in. And they had already been demigrated out, and they found themselves in Germany. And I think the people that found themselves here and somehow found a place other than here were the only lucky ones out of the group that didn't end up in concentration camps afterwards, whenever the Great Jewish Revolt hit, and then Hitler enacted after that. And there's evidence that they kicked it all off, and then the Jewish people kicked it all off, and the German government answer, because they were revolting against the government of a people that they had just become, you know, basically immigrants to. I mean, imagine a bunch of Mexicans coming up, and then all of a sudden them running up and getting in front of your capital trying to take over and throwing all these revolts. You know, I mean, it's just nowadays you wouldn't allow anything like that to happen from the whichever side you're looking at. But because of the Bible and things like that, people threw half this information out. And then, of course, due to what Hitler did with, you know, the World War, and how Goebbels and some of these freaks did things to try to find out genetic engineering, they really made them into the devil and the Antichrist. And so there was the declaration I was telling you before, the Balfour Declaration. And this was because we got involved with World War II, and it ended up giving the Jews back Palestine. And it says here the population of Jews rose by 300,000 in the years leading up to World War II, and that led to the violence between the Jews and Palestinians, which still runs to this day, and we forced it on them by plugging them in and stealing part of their land and giving it to these people, because the Bible said that they had stole it from somebody else a long time ago. It still doesn't make much sense to me even to this day, but it was a lot of Jewish Zionists and stuff, and they were committing a lot of the terrorism and stuff, and it's believed that there was like a false terrorism too, that there are people that have documented a lot of false terrorism where they were causing damage to themselves and going, look, it's them, and then, you know, killing people with bombs and then going, oh my God, look, it's them. Straight up. I mean, I'm not making this shit up. So let's look at the other one. Let's look at the one before this. Let's look at the one at 66 AD that goes to about 74. The one that was Armageddon for these people. The one where the angels and the trumpets and all the things and the 7 heads of the dragon can all be correlated to Rome. And where they said, you know, hey, if you want one, you can have one. To show you that, man, it's going to be a little difficult to do this, but through my research, I have found out that what they have done here whenever the Roman people, through the Greeks, rewrote the Bible, you see the Bible that we have, even our oldest ones, have been definitely touched upon by the Greeks, haven't they? Even the ones that are hidden, like the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff, that there's some books in there that they don't want you to read, and whenever you do, oh, it's Gnosticism, and there we go with that word again that just means you know about divine stuff. And these people had them right next together. These people that knew everything said, this is all this, and you want to throw out some, so I'm going to hide them because that ain't right. And now that we find them, when we read them, you find out kind of the way it really went, and everybody's like, no, 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 and yeah, yeah, yeah. And you find out when you look into it that it had a whole lot to do with the fact that they were in the middle of all the money, and they were not separating church and state as we talk about now today. And there's a lot of things that were leading up to it. And of course, you know, Rome's been occupying this area for a long, long time. I mean, they took over this area in Alexander the Great, and they really haven't never let up, have they? And so they've had it for a long, long time. And boy, them Jewish people are real tired of it. That they want back their land that they had a guy dream of one night that was somebody else's land anyhow he was dreaming on. And they want that land back. The land where somebody sat and Abraham almost did the thing and sacrificed his own son. And because he almost killed and caused child sacrifice in the spot, we should really give this back to these people. I mean, I don't understand. You start thinking things on the actual terms of things, people, as opposed to being caught in this glow, you know, of what really is going on here. Clearly, nobody wants these people. They keep getting kicked out of everywhere. Things keep happening. Everywhere they infiltrate, they cause problems with the government and the financial situation. And then what happens to them is, well, listen, I'm not anti-Semite. I'm anti-people ruining shit. And I'm also, by the way, anti-it's all gonna die. And I'm anti that mankind is all bettering itself just so it can all be killed one day because the storm god got pissed off. Listen, I'll tell you straightforward. If these people had the God that was the God of everything, then what has happened to them through time wouldn't have happened to them. You can't tell me during the Holocaust that every one of them didn't pray to God for it to end, and he did nothing for them. In fact, if you look back at the Bible, and you look at Ezekiel 20, he takes blame for all of the child sacrifice and bad worship, and he basically curses them to the point and tells them they will have an Armageddon, and they're all going to die because they're not worth it. They're too stiff-necked of people. And what's stiff-necked? They won't look up at the stars and see that it was all an allegory. They've taken this whole thing way, way too far. These Indians that lived in a desert that really, not Indians, but like American Indians, these primitive people that live in tents, that don't even have houses or anything, that live in a desert, that go around trying to cause genocide to steal a land from people because somebody had a dream one day. And then you find out that their religion's based on the fact that we're all screwed and we're all going to die and we're all sinners and we're all for shit. And you're like, what? Yeah, well, here's how it goes. A woman grew out from a rib, and then the woman ate from a magic tree because a talking snake told her to. And that's how we're fucked. And they didn't let us eat from the other magic tree. What are you talking about? The tree of knowledge. Tree of knowledge of good and evil. We're not supposed to know the difference between good and evil? What kind of theory is this? We're supposed to be dumb, meek, and naive like deers? We were supposed to stay cavemen? And that we're all fucked because of that. Is that right? Yeah, and we're screwed for generations, and we gotta kill our kids. And no, you know what? When they start mentioning this crap, I would just back away from their little tent and try to. I would go someplace else. I'd go up to Rome. Yeah, I'd go up to Rome, Greece, someplace like that. Hell, I'd get in a boat and maybe I'd find the New World. But wouldn't it be sad when a couple hundred years later people all showed up and go, God, Jesus, and you're like, oh, hey. No, then you get over here to South America and stuff, and they're all doing the same damn thing where they're taking people and killing them and sacrificing them. And of course, by then, here's what's funny is, now check out this moment in history. We as conquerors find these people to be brutal and stupid and paganistic, and we kill them all off because they're doing shit like killing hundreds of thousands of people and cutting out people's hearts while they're alive and trying to sacrifice it to gods and doing stuff, and we see this as stupid and pagan. Well, why are we doing this? Oh, we're doing this because God and da-da-da. Well, hand them the book, and whenever they read the book, they're going to be like, well, look right here, you've got you eating the people and doing all kinds of stuff, and you're sacrificing people. Hold on, here you are doing genocide. Wait, are you fixing to do that to us? Ah. And that leads to disgusting things like this, where you find out that love is sacrifice. Okay, so if I believe that, then I would say, well, love is sacrifice. Let me look in the Bible. Oh, sacrifice. Sacrifice is to kill humans, maybe even have to eat them, and you're supposed to sacrifice your firstborn kid. So I guess we're about to take Uncle Keith, and it's what happens. Yeah. No, people. That's not love. Sacrifice is not love. No, don't try to equate this bullshit. Listen, falling in love with somebody might mean having to sacrifice something that you want, like your old stupid couch and stuff, but that's not what we're talking about, but they're equating it. No, what we're talking about is this stuff like this, which all of these, by the way, are Bible depictions, where they take and heat up. There's these guys back here creating this fire. Let me zoom in on this. There's these guys back here creating this fire, and there's this brazen bronze statue of a bull that you're supposed to wipe the blood on the horns of, right? And then you take this statue and like you're handing it to Santa Claus. This is the reason I was so fucking scared of Santa Claus when we were a kid. It's probably some primordial thought where maybe back a couple of generations ago, back during this time, I was one of these kids that this happened to, and I did not want you to hand me to the man in the red suit, because this guy here, adorned in red and in brass, would be heated up so hot that whenever they put the baby on him, the baby would start searing and convulsing and drop into the pit and roll into the fire that's in here. And during this, all these guys here would shake tambourines and rattles and wail and yell, and you do off trumpets. And this is to keep the sound of the baby screaming from the people who had children that it was going to happen to next. Yep, this is Baal worship. And this is your ancient Jewish people, the Canaanites, and their worship. The worship of Yahweh would have been nothing different whatsoever. And I show you this, and you look at these two little kids here that are looking and realizing these guys are stoking the fire, and they're probably just about old enough to realize what's going on. And if you look at this picture, they've been separated aside from their parents, and they're next. Just think about this. And no matter what religion these people right here had, do you think you should follow it? Do you? Wouldn't it be an atrocity to mankind itself if you let some nomadic tent people that used to sacrifice to the rain god children in this method here? This place is known as Gehenna. We call it hell. Look up the way that they used to describe this and the actual Hebrew letters, and it looks like an altar, and the trapdoor flips. I am not kidding you. It's called a tophet. That they're still doing today, that they talked about here, where these people were ushering in their children in an ancient Jewish temple. And when you go in that door, just like in the concentration camps, you don't come out. You wonder where Hitler got it from. There's a stupid paper, and people have looked at it as being, listen to this disgusting son of a bitch, but he basically says, I gave them their just reward for what they had done to their own children for thousands of generations. And you're like, what? What makes that any different than that? What makes that any different than that? Or that? Or this Baal worship? Or these ancient pagan Jews thought that they could make it rain if they killed enough babies to appease the storm god Baal. And you think it's all over today, but believe it or not, there's been this big wave, and people are going for it for some reason, that there's this wave for this Temple of Baal altar and awnings to be set up all over places, Times Square and Europe and everywhere. Look up Arch of Baal, and they will show you that these Baal, B-A-A-L, and they'll show you all these arches people are putting all around the world to commemorate, and of course the arch is a gateway. And a gateway could be a way to release a god, but yeah, this is Baal. And some of them got real fancy. They had little collapsible arms like this that when you put the baby on there, it would like flop it in there. They had other ones, they had arms that were on the sides, and they would flop you in. One of their rituals, by the way, was they would set up a line of fire, 2 lines of fire, and then the priests would all run through it, and then they would cave in all the fire and make the people run through it, and if anybody faltered at all, they would kill them. Yep, you have to walk through fire, baptized with fire, yeah. Look, you can actually see it mentioned a few times in the Bible. I'm not going to go in and nitpick and show you where it talked about people being baptized by the fire and the holy fire, and that's what it was. That was the fire walking they did, and yeah. Yep, so just a coin toss if your kid dies. Disgustingly, some of these were built in a way that while they roasted your kids, they would cook bread in the little pockets. Isn't that? Because you got to eat of the flesh and the bread and drink of the blood, right? Yeah. It's even Christ and his Passover meal. Show you something about Passover in Josephus and Jesus Christ and Mary.
Josephus wrote that a woman named Mary, who called her son a myth for the world, slayed him, ate him, thereby turning him into a human Passover lamb. In the Gospels, we now have the Last Supper. Jesus tells his disciples, "Take, eat, this is my body, this is my blood," thereby turning him into a human Passover lamb.
Well, isn't that special?
Hello?
Hey, Satan.
What is it?
Are you thirsty?
No.
There's some wine by you.
Oh, okay.
Drink it.
Okay. Oh, what is that?
It's my blood.
Oh, dude, that is effing disgusting.
Hey, Satan.
What?
Quit whining.
Oh, what a dick. Hello?
Yo, it's the J-Dog. My dad's better than your dad.
Yeah, technically I don't really have a dad, so...
Oh, shit. No, I didn't. I'm sorry. I didn't realise. I'm sorry. I should have.
No, man, it's fine. It's cool. It's fine.
No, it's not. It's not. I should have checked prior. I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Well, I think because your dad created me, he's also my dad.
Oh. Well, I guess like in a topsy-turvy sort of way, I am my dad as well as the Holy Spirit and stuff. It's complicated, so.
Dad?
Son.
Oh my god.
Daddy's my name, mate. Dinner's ready.
Oh, awesome. Be there in a minute. What are we eating?
Ribs.
And you can find it in the Bible if you look hard enough, the places, and especially the Old Bible, where they haven't gone, oh, they messed it up. No, they didn't mess anything up. Word for word, right, people? So here, but unto you that fear my name shall be the Son of Righteousness arrive with healing in his wings, and ye shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall. This is the prophecy of Jesus, right? Yeah, the word over there is son, S-U-N. That even back then, they kind of are giving you this allegory that the sun comes up and makes everything happen. And what is it that Moses calls them? A stiff-necked people. You know, you're stiff-necked if you can't look up. Your neck's stiff and you can't look up and see what the hell's going on. You're just straightened. Like with blinders on, you're headed straight forward and you can't even see the forest for the trees. You can't see the stars even though they're right there in front of you at nighttime. During the day, you're blinded to them by the sun. Here's another one in John 8:12 that people try to say, well, this is how you can prove that Jesus is actually Satan, because he tells you he's the bright and morning star, and the bright and morning star is Satan. Well, that's because in the Bible they equate Venus, the planet that's the bright and morning star, with Inanna, and then Inanna's evil because she's the whore of Babylon. And that tries to equate all that together. But here he tells you that he's the root and the offspring. And here's a, not sun worship, but here's a tree worship situation, and the tree of life thing again that keeps popping up with, you know, different religions all wheedling in on this just a little bit. But yeah. And so another reason too that people say that this makes it to where he's Satan is because he says, and I'm the offspring of David and the bright and morning star, and the fact that he's not. And well, he's not because Joseph, his dad, is related to David, but his mom, Mary, would have been related to a different family branch, right? And that's how Catholics and Christians try to save themselves in this situation, because she didn't have a daddy. With the virgin birth, you got to twist it now. So here when he says he's the offspring of David, Jesus was just lying. Okay, well, we'll even eat that one. Okay, I'm going to eat one for you. The offspring of David. But no, he's not. He's the offspring of God. Remember, an angel came down and impregnated the lady, like what always happens, you know? Yeah, these angels are allowed to have sex. Of course, that's supposed to be bad when the sons of God got with the daughters of men. That makes Nephilim, so that makes Jesus a Nephilim, and here we go again. No, okay, well, One thing's for sure, this morning star thing is Lucifer, the bright morning star, and that's Lucifer, and Lucifer's supposed to be the be-all, end-all crap of Revelations, and here he tells you that I am that, so that's just freaky how, I don't know, Rome put that in there, somebody put that in there. Well, it's been there the whole time, people. It's been there the whole time. And Philo-Biblos, he's an ancient Greek scholar that was in love with the Bible. In fact, his name means love of the Bible. Philo is love, and Biblos, of course, is Bible, but Philo is love, like philosophy. Sophia is the goddess of knowledge, or it's supposed to be the female entity that's missing out of the Bible. Perhaps the dove connotation, and of course the reason they have Mary really exonerated, and things, and the Holy Spirit is basically looked at as being that. But philosophy is meant to be the love of knowledge, and Philo-Biblos is the love of the Bible. And this man loved the Bible. And let's see what he says. He says that in the first century, he assures us the Phoenician name of Saturn is Israel. And Israel and Abraham are names constantly confounded and used as perfect synonyms with each other throughout the Old and New Testament. That Abraham was a mocking in the Bible of Saturn and how he sacrificed his children and you know, and that this is actually something that it happened. And that when it originally happened, though, it was actually a guy that came from, it was a Phoenician, Kronos, the Phoenician, who is Saturn. Kronos is Saturn in the mythos. He's also the same planet as Kronos, and he's also known as Kayun, right? So whenever they say that you're chanting to your gods, or you worship your star of your god Remphan, now there's your other dialect over there, and their name of the god of Saturn. So it says Israel and Abraham are names constantly confounded and used as perfect synonyms with each other throughout the Old and New Testament. So whenever they talk about Abraham, sometimes they're talking about Saturn and what it does, or Saturn worship, and the gods of Saturn, and the people when they used to worship Saturn. Like, it's really twisted back into that. And this is how it's all the same. And just to clarify, what he's saying here, and what I have found to be true, and you can look this up, is that in ancient Phoenician, whenever they talked about the star that was wandering in the sky, that we turned into the farthest away, or the most high God, that was, they could tell Babylon and people back then, and all these people around there got the information for them before they killed them all off, and ran them out, and they ended up becoming Caucasian mountain people. Anyhow, they found out that the Phoenician word for that planet, and you can look it up and find it today, is Israel. That's what they called it, because they believed in the god El, and it is the planet of El. And you can indeed see in the Bible where everything is El on the end of it. The true names of God that you see are El and Elyon, Elohim. El is the Canaanite god. His son was a god of war and storm. He was named Baal. They twist his name and call him Yahweh, and still sacrifice children to him through the Bible. It's pretty direct. One way that he knows that they correlate these is in the oldest of inscriptions, which he still has access to at this time, the libraries of Alexandria and all of the knowledge that they have back then. He tells you that they later changed the Bible. And by saying that, he doesn't mean they later changed the Bible. You end up with a Bible that's not the one that he's looking at and the knowledge he looks at whenever he goes through this, by the way. And 3 generations after this man here is whenever they do the Council of Nicaea and go off like crazy. But he tells you, and thus throughout the New Testament, which is but a version of the pagan mythology, Abraham is precisely the same hieroglyph for time. And of course, time is Chronos, the chronometer. He's the god of time with his sickle. He's Father Time, which Saturn was in the old system. And he's talking about his old system, like they've let out the old system that they have in Rome of all their Olympic gods, and now they're going with this new idea, this Sol Invictus, this Mithra, and that in the New Testament they have things that pretty much correlate with it. I'm sure somebody looked at this later and go, this would be a great one to twist in if we could just get rid of those Mithra people. Dun, 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 dun. Gotcha. And so he goes on to say the absolute identity of the god Saturn with the patriarch Abraham and the certainty that all of this is related of Abraham in the sacred scripture is allegorical, and consequently that no such a person ever existed and no such events ever occurred is established beyond all controversy. I put a twist to that, people. I tell you, whenever they look through this stuff, that even though they're trying to get an allegory over it and everything, that it actually does relate to something. The reason people grabbed onto this later is that, yes, there is some truth to this. What's the truth? He killed his kid and everything. This may be the god Kronos in the first place. No, it's not. He comes way after the point. Abraham is not, but, 1700, 1800 BC, and there's Mithras stuff that goes back to 2100 BC supposedly, and the Sumerians go back to 12,500 BC, and then we lose them in the last ice age. So it doesn't look like you could put that on him necessarily, but then again, that is the name they use. So they tell you that they are equating it to it, but they're out of timeline. They're wrong, but this is who it is what he's saying. And I can see the allegory with that, of course, with him trying to kill his kid. There's another famous Greek guy that says that the Bible's just all a copy anyhow because Abraham tried to mimic the ancient Kronos, who actually killed his kid and stuff, and that he was supposed to have done it. And so he was trying to, A, equate the Bible and say, yeah, and this happened with us, so that might be us too. And then B, the fact that no, he just mimicked it because they have stuff that they're looking at that predates the Bible. Even if they give their bullshit dates of people living 1,000 years, they still have stuff that predates that in front of them. He goes on to say the patriarch Abraham was and is nothing else but a star, even the planet Saturn, and the patriarch David likely hereafter to be proved to be no more than another star, and that the word patriarch should primarily and originally have reference only to a star or combinations of stars in the first place, and then that's what they would equate that actually to now, that they would say that they're groups of stars, because they also have other references where they say that the angels are the stars, and that this one asteroid attack was when angels came down from heaven, and that's falling stars. And of course, these people and the Egyptians already know that those are meteors because some of them hit the ground and we've gone and found them. But these people living in a desert are telling you that it's when it's angels coming down. They just don't get it, these stiff-necked people. But here we are 2,000 years later, and we've got their Bible in front of us. Interesting to note about him equating all this and saying you'll find out David's a star. How about the fact that Bethlehem itself and Jerusalem are actually little constellation clusters, that they actually have them up in the sky. See if I can find that for you. And so you find out Bethlehem actually means house of bread. and that this is the constellation of House of Bread, and whenever the alignment came through Bethlehem, that this was the constellation that it lined up with, and this gave people the idea of the Christ being born through Virgo, the Virgin. Another interesting fact about this, can you see it here whenever I tell you that this is the constellation of Jonah the whale? Right? You see the whale facing left and his tail kicking up at her? You see that? Yeah. She also at one time was a mermaid because of her flipped up tail, but this is the House of Bread that you see here, this alignment and the way that they lined up. And see how square it is there, and how it's got the 1, 2, 3 kick right here. The 1, 2, 3 kick right here that actually is the off angle that is also in the pyramids. This is not Orion's belt, but this is another symbolism written in the sky that gives you that same offset that people don't usually catch. And the fact that this is an exact square, I mean, it really is squared off, you know, except for this end, the opening. And Virgo is seen, the Jonah the whale thing, I believe, is whenever a planet comes by in precession, and what it'll do is it'll see to go this way, and then it'll stop and go back this way into his stomach for 3 days, and then come back out, and the whale spit him back out. There you go. So like you see planets that process like that. And there's your story of Jonah and the whale, and a lot of it's just allegory, zodiacal, and time stuff, but somehow they lost that fact later and then got stiff-necked, and next thing you know, they forgot it all, and everybody else knows it. Somehow that got beaten, killed, and the flesh stripped off of everybody in the Dark Ages, and now we come out of this fog, and it takes 2,000 years before we figure it out. Isn't that disgusting? And this leads one to conclude that the thing that Jacob found that started the whole Jerusalem and everything, and Bethlehem's got to be my thing, is this house of bread. And so he found the house of bread. Well, he found, well, what is that? Well, that's Nana's house. That's some of the Sumerian places, and that he actually was finding someone else's place, that they already had God there. The strange thing and the disturbing thing is that his next statement is that God said, "Oh, this is going to be yours one day," and it wasn't. No, and he kept promising it to just generation after generation after generation, who never would get it, would they? But maybe it's perhaps that he wasn't even talking about that place on the ground where he took a sleep at, but he found it up in the sky when he was looking up. And in doing so, one day he would be there. That's what he was talking about. And the Israelites and Jewish people don't even need that land at all, or don't want it, and it's not sacred to them in any way. It was somebody else's.